What we understand from the Mughal painting is also when Babur attacked India, he was not very impressed by the Indian subcontinent. He didn't even like the weather, he didn't like the food here. No. But he was somehow impressed by the flora and fauna of India. And Babur was, if you can see, he's a very genius sort of man who was interested in poetry, he was interested in writing, he used to write himself. There are memoirs of Babur which is there in the Baburnama and later painted. And then you have, he was like, there are paintings which are done by him. Paintings, I think there are number of sketches which we get. So in that manner he was a man of a very refined taste. But when he captured India and then it's almost like Babur looted and then went back to Kabul. Okay. So, and as I said, he was not quite impressed by the weather of the Indian subcontinent. Then Humayun came onto the throne and he ruled almost for 4 years, and then he was defeated by Sher Shah Suri and he take refuge in the camp of Shah Tamas in Persia. So this is where he come across these two major artists. He come across this whole Persian miniature tradition. And this is where you will see how he brings these two important miniature artists from the court of Shah Tamas, which is Mir Sayyid Ali and Abdul Samad. And these are the master painters of the Akbar school. So it was brought by Humayun, but when Humayun took over the throne, he was killed within. He didn't rule much, or he didn't have much time to have this painting tradition. So the painting tradition, what we talk about the Mughal, it started during the time of Akbar. Okay. So the first painting, or was it this, as we have discussed yesterday, this whole Karkhana system came up. It's almost coming from during the from the Akbar time onwards. So it was a huge project. It was almost considered as a dream project of Akbar to paint Hamzanama. And Hamzanama is again a Persian text, and we will talk about the historical, cultural and this lineage of Mughal, Temur and how they connect with it. He has this magical past, okay, something mystical, if you see a mystical figure. And the story is the whole, and there is Hamzanama which is done in Persian also, and then this is because he is this character which Akbar was influenced by, and as there are the historians, the scholars believe that and Hamzanama were the first. They were comparatively in size of miniature. If you see, they are almost 2 feet paintings, and it's believed they may be painted like a scroll or something, because these on the cloth, they were painted on the cloth, and they used to be hung around the tents of Akbar. So then you have, and this is, as I said, this is a huge project. It's almost believed that there were 1400 folios which were painted, okay, and most of them are now lost, and they were distributed, they were burnt and fired, and so it's almost, there are very few paintings of Hamzanama done during the time of Akbar is remain, and which is there for us to see. But it's a very interesting set if you see. See, these are some of the instances from Hamza. So it's almost, the Hamzanama is the story of Hamza, all his fights, his magical powers, and how he defeats the demons or his own enemy and all. So it's this whole story of Hamza, about the Hamzanama is the story of Amir Hamza, who is a very important character in the Persian miniature and in the Persian literary source. So around whom the whole story revolve and the narrations are. But when you look at the stylistic quality, when you look at the sets of Hamzanama, the very important part is the Hamzanama is an eclectic set. You will see a different form of style. You will see a sort of a Persian style which is coming up. You see is reflected. You will see certain indigenous style, like what is there, like some certain influences of pre-Rajasthani, what we are calling now as the pre-Rajasthani, or I will call it indigenous style. Then you have certain Central Asian, like if you see this is Chinese. If you see like how the clouds are painted and all, it's more Chinese, how even the landscape is treated, more close to the Chinese landscape. So it's a Central Asian influence which is coming up. So Hamzanama, because if you read the books and all, it says Tutinama was the first set which was produced in the court of Akbar or in the Akbari school. But the first set to be commissioned is the first work to be commissioned is Hamzanama, because it was such a huge project and it was started under Mir Sayyid Ali. Then he went to, I think he went for Hajj, and then it come under Abdul Samad and all. So you will even see how the influence of master artists is also changing. Okay? So where you have a Persian influence somewhere, then when the artist will change, you will see more indigenous style, more towards what coming up of a Mughal, even in Hamzanama sets. So initially, what Mughal painting, what Akbar school, I won't call it Mughal because Mughal itself is an umbrella term for all the paintings which are produced during the time of in the school of Jahangir, Akbar and Shah. So they are different schools, and first school is the Akbari school. So what we are looking here, if you see this painting, the first painting, you see this, and I have showed you the Sultanate and indigenous or the pre. This is the whole new tradition of painting altogether coming up. So, and this is very close to, as I said, it's very close to the Persian painting tradition, where you have this decorated motifs, the decorated, very intricate decorated patterns of textile coming up of this capola, sort of a kiosk type of pattern. Even the whole figuration, it drastically changed. And the important part to look at is the linear quality of the drawings. The linear quality of the painting. It's more drawing based, right? Drawing based. There is sort of a perspective in the painting, and it's the multiple perspective, if you see, which is used in the painting. When I'm talking about this style, how there are eclectic means you take from all the eclectic style in the Hamzanama set is different style, or you take from eclectic is a term used for using different from the different region and making it their own. This is what is happening, eclectic. Okay. So you see, this is one form of style which you find in the set. This is the another form of the style which is happening. Then you have something of this sort. And with this, if you see here, here it is more where you will see huge vistas, the landscape, and the color palette is also very different. Here where you have very bright color palette, then you will see, and even when you look at the Hamzanama set, even the trees and the landscape which is shown, which is not Indian, it's very, as I said, Central Asian towards Persian, Afghanistan, that sort of landscape which you will see reflected in the Hamzanama set. You see it here. And even the depiction of the trees and all, which is somewhere very naturalistic as well as stylized. It almost works like the patterns and all as a motif, if you see, and how intricately they are building up this compositions. And of course the perspective which is coming up with it. So you see here how, and one particular number of sets, one style, where you will have lot of emphasis on the architecture. You will see a lot of architectural building and all which is shown, and it's interesting to look in the Persian as well as in the earlier Mughals, in the Mughal painting also, all through the Mughal school, that how they have they put lot of emphasis on the architecture to show the multidimensionality, or the what you call this dynamic feature of the painting tradition, where they were trying to show infinity of the landscape, or infinity as in the huge vista through the perspective. A very intricate tile pattern of Persia, that ceramic tiles which is used, the towers and all. As I said, a lot of influences on like how carpet design, the intricate motif of carpet design, tapestry, and decoration on the architecture, which is all is reflected when you see the Hamzanama set. It's a beautiful set to altogether to look at. And very important, very interesting, this is the time where the Indian artists or the indigenous artists who are working in the court or who are working in the court of Akbar first time introduced to all these style and all these type of color palette altogether. Okay. So the next text, which is Tutinama, and so Tutinama is early Akbari school, and this take it's a combination of Sultanate and early Akbari. That's why it's early Akbari, means there are certain things which reflects that it may have taken, there may be the artist from the court of, from the Persian style who are aware about the Persian style, who have worked on it, and then there are indigenous style who have worked on it. Because these particular style, which is known as Chakdar Jama, is the Sultanate style or the indigenous style. But they have almost transformed this whole, and even the flatness of the background. But when you see this particular setting, it's more close to Hamzanama, more close to that Persian tradition of architecture. Then you have Baburnama. So, as I said, you have texts like Hamzanama, Persian texts which were illustrated. Then you have a number of memoirs or number of biographies of Mughal rulers which were painted. So you have Baburnama painted, Akbarnama painted, Temurnama painted. Then you have a lot of Persian poetries like poetry of Sadi, poetry of Nizami and all, which were also illustrated. So the poetry of Sadis which were painted. So and Akbar, if you see, Akbar as a patron, Akbar was a huge, very important. Why? To understand the Akbar's contribution in the Indian painting is very important, because this is the first time where and as I said, Karkhana is not only about the painting. There you have the translation of the Persian text, the translation of the Sanskrit text, or the translation of Sanskrit to Persian is happening. Okay, and then they were painted. So it's a very prolific. If you see, it's a very prolific. The Karkhana is a very prolific space, and as well as Akbar has a huge. It is like he has a very strong ambition to build up that sort of a library, that sort of a collection of these particular illustrations. Okay, so you can understand this project, the whole project, how ambitious is that. And this is the first time with the Akbar you have a lot of recognition is given to artists. And what is it? He has an eye for people. So one day there are a lot of anecdotes about how he chose this particular artist when he saw him there. So Akbar was a patron, and when you look at Jahangir becomes a connoisseur. Jahangir has a very refined taste. Okay. He will have a very limited number of artists who will paint, who are well-versed, who are almost master in their craft, either in painting animals, in painting faces, in painting landscape. So they are the master artists. But what Akbar has is, as I said, what Akbar has is Karkhanas. Akbar as a patron has a lot of people employed. There are hundreds of people working in this Karkhana, hundreds of artists working in the Karkhanas. So it's almost work as a workshop where artists were given, and so artists became, as artists, it's a profession which has become. And you will find the name of the artist. And this is, as I said, this is the first time artists are writing their name. So we are aware, we are getting, it's almost mark a very important point in the Indian painting tradition, because before that we are not aware about who the artists were. But here, through the name on the folio, like whichever folio is painted, you will find that Chitara, the name of this, who has made the face, who has painted and all, which will are signed accordingly. You find like there are sets in Akbarnama, and there are even sets in the later sets of Ramayana and all, where you will find name of almost 20 to 30 artists which is signed in the borders or at the back. So we know a particular number of people has worked on this particular folio. I'm just talking about folio and not set. Okay, so that's become important. And there are almost number of texts which were translated, number of texts which were painted, illustrated. This is from Akbarnama. And slowly, when we move towards the Baburnama, you will see a sort of what we call as the style of the Akbar school starts seeping in. You have it's almost this transitional phase of the Persian and Central Asian and moving towards indigenous or more Akbari style, which you will clearly see in the Akbarnama, where you will see this landscape toned down. It's almost the muted color palette which has been used. Then the landscape which look the infinite landscape in somewhere in the vertical or the horizontal format, and then the decoration, the ornament, the detailing, the ornamentation is almost losing and becoming more naturalistic. The space start looking more naturalistic. And this is almost quite late in the Akbar school, where you have this, you see, very intricate patterns and a very thick detail, like what you can say, an ornamental decoration, the border decoration, which is known as the hashyas. These are the hashyas. So even now there are painters who just paint hashyas, and there are the painters who paints the composition and then the hashya is put up. Okay? So, and there were a lot of, if you see, there were hashyas become a very important part in the Akbari school after a point of time, because there are gold which has been used in the hashyas. If you see this is the gold, which is making it more a valuable object. So as I said, you will see the architecture which is coming up, the more indigenous architecture rather than looking at the Persian architecture, which is more like minarets and all. Here you will see more indigenous architecture of Havelis and all, which is coming up, but with the Mughal influence, with the Akbari style, not the Persian style. You will see they are devoid of any sort of decoration, because when we have seen in Hamzanama, they have this tile pattern, intricately carved tiles of ultramarine blue and all, and then you have painted even very bright pinks. But here they almost, as I said, toned down, and you have even the color palette for architecture is almost pink, white, a very slight, very light crimson and all, which has been used. These are very late, almost the end of the Akbari school, where you will see the representation where you have almost this polyglotous Bible and all. Like what you can say, the European imagery start coming in the Indian subcontinent, and they were like, because they are coming, they are this admissionaries are coming to Akbar's court, and they are gifting him that. So this was sent to the master artist in the karkhanas. They looked into it, and then they, according to their own style, if you see, this is very close to the miniature style, and then they bring that tradition of the portrait tradition. So they might, through clothing, through attire, they may look European or Portuguese, but when you look the stylistic quality of it, when you see the linear quality of it, or even the color palette, they all are quite Mughal or Indian. Then comes Jahangir, and as I explained, that Jahangir has, so Akbar sets, when you look at the Akbari school of painting, they do not have such sort of uniformity. There are number of sets which are painted, so some have indigenous style, some have Persian style, some have mix of them. Then later even late, quite late. जैसे हरिवंश has a comparatively a different style to Akbarnama, maybe painted during the same time. So there are, as I said, there are a number of artists who are working on the different sets. So you feel that sort of prolific style, and this if you try to understand, it's a very dynamic process altogether, where a number of styles have had started being called out as Akbari school or the Akbari school style. Okay, but then when Jahangir comes onto the throne, Jahangir, as I said, Jahangir was already he has already established the karkhanas and appointed artists to paint his portraits, paint flora and fauna. He was fond of flora and fauna, like the animals and the exotic or the different species of animals and all, which were painted. And there are like when the travelers used to come, even whether it is an Indian traveler or European traveler, he will listen to their memoir, what they have seen while coming to India, or what a particular merchant, when he traveled to the other state, what he has seen, what sort of new. And there are times when the merchants or the traders will come and tell him about a particular animal. Like there is a story where somebody explained what zebra is, and he tell Mansoor to paint the zebra. So this is our instances where he has a collection. He wants to have you will see the collection of flora, you will see the collection of fauna, and you will see the collection of birds and all, which is painted, which was his contribution. It's a huge contribution if you see the Jahangir's contribution in the painting tradition. And then you have, as I said, he has very defined taste, or he is very specific what he wants from his painters, okay, or from his artistic guild. He was very clear about it. So these are the particular set which is known as the allegorical set. And allegorical sets are in the painting, in Jahangir's painting, are where Jahangir is represented in a different format, okay, or he is the king of the kings, and he's sitting on an hourglass, where again he's equal to God or equal to Allah. And so as a pious man, if you see in more as like a Muslim, very pious Muslim man. So if you see here, you see Thomas Rowe. This is from somebody from Persia. Then you see I don't remember his name, but he was appointed. He was there in the Jahangir's court, and he is almost gifting him the manuscript. And here you have even the artist who has brought a particular. If you see very minutely, you will see a painting there. And with Jahangir, there is an important factor which is happening, of course, as I said, about his own image, which is made through the painting, which he is trying to project through painting of the works which is done in his court. And then you have this coming up of European objects. See, so I'm not saying you will see a European influence, but you will see a European object, which is start seeping into the Jahangir's painting tradition, Jahangiri school painting tradition, because this coming up of a thick hello, and then you have this hourglass, is all that which is coming from the tradition. Even here, if you see the globe, and this is very interesting, like the Matsya Avatar, then you have then the globe, and he is the one who is saving the. So this is how it is like. Then we look into the other. We look at it, it's more like what is there. I'm just giving you the wider idea what is there in all around, what is happening everywhere. When we talk about the miniature tradition, it is not only Mughal or Rajasthani. There are a lot of other places where this tradition has flourished, and it has even the influence and give and take from all the other schools also. Like Mughal has influence on Deccani, and Deccani has influence on a lot of Rajasthani schools as such. So around 1560, during the same time, not same time, but around 1516 to 1618, you have different sultanates. What we have seen in Mandu and what we are talking about sultanate is the Delhi Sultanate. Okay, and Mandu and all are the regional sultanates. But then you have this is the Deccan Sultanate. When we talk about the Sultanate in Deccan, it's known as Deccani Sultanate, and it's a very different style altogether when we look at Deccani Sultanate, because Deccan Sultanate has a very strong connection with the Persian court. Okay, so you will see the coming up of the Persian artists to the Safavid artists. Okay, Safavid. So they are coming to the court of the Deccan Sultan's court and working. So you have a very refined style which comes up in the Deccani school. So the first school which is known as Adil Shahi. They are known as the Adil Shahi school, which is the Ahmednagar. And you have, very interestingly, you have painted, like you have Ragamala which is painted, the Yoginis which are painted, then there are portrait studies which has been done. See, a very different style, a very refined form of style of Mughal as well as Persian, if you see. The sort of tactile quality of the Mughal, the tactile quality of the Safavid code, and somewhere this background or the color palette which is more close to the Mughal. This is very close to the Mughal school, where you have this type of flora, like this type of foliage and the lush background, huge background which is used. And you notice one thing, you have in the Deccani school, you have this very elongated figures and sort of a naturalism which you may not find in Mughal court, but which is there in the Deccani. It is very interesting, that sort of naturalism which seems. The portrait studies, as I said, taking from both the Safavid, the Mughal, the indigenous style, you see here. And where you will see Mughal, even when you, apart from Jahangir, when you look at Akbar and all, you won't see this, when it comes to the attires, when it comes to the jewelry, they're very modestly dressed up. Of course, in Jahangir, it's the statement purpose. There are memoirs in the Jahangirnama itself. There are instances where it is clearly said that if the Jagirdars or if the governors have to attend, they have to be dressed up in a particular manner. They have to. It's almost like this refined taste which even his comrades have to follow, or even his governors has to follow it when they come to the court, when they come for any festivals or any sort of event. Okay, but it's not like that in Akbar. And when we move towards Deccani, you will see the human being, the figures are clad with clothes, and there is a tactile quality which is there, and clad with clothes, the jewelry. And very interesting is how the treatment of hair becomes very important in the Deccani school. Then comes the Rajasthani. Similarly, in Rajasthani, like in the presently, I always say when I take the classes, when I take Indian painting classes, Rajasthani, Mughal, all these are a very broader term, and they were used at that point of time when initially they were acquiring this set, when they are writing about it in the early 20th century. This is the time where these titles were given, this nomenclature is given. But now what happens, we are already aware about the different schools which are present. So call them Rajasthani is, as I said, it's an absolute term, and it's is not right. Because, so you have different schools in Rajasthan. So when we will talk about the particular set, we will talk about the school and not call it Rajasthan. Because if a painting is acquired from its provenance is Mewar, it's a Mewar school and not Rajasthan school. I hope you are getting it what I want to say. So in Rajasthan, you have very different schools. You have major art activity or art development which happen, schools which develop. So you have Mewar, then you have Kishangarh, Bundi Kota, Jaisalmer, Jodhpur, Bikaner, Jaipur, Kishangarh. So these are some of the important schools which developed, or important places in which the miniature tradition flourished. So the earliest art tradition which flourished in the state or the area of Rajasthan is considered as Mewar, either the Mewar or Ghu. So it's Mewar and it's believed. So Mewar has this indigenous style. What we have, Chaur Panchashika is known as the indigenous style. And you see the influences of Chaur Panchashika in the set which is known as the Chawan Ragmala, which is 1605. The first set, so artistic activity in Rajasthan as such through the court. Because of that, as I said, all these places has a court. Now you have to even understand this, all this activity, we are talking about miniature activity is a courtly activity. Okay, so Udaipur has a court, which is, so it's happening in the court of Udaipur. Udaipur as in, because Rana Pratap was defeated by, Akbar defeated him, and then he moved towards Chawan. And this, so it is believed that this set was painted in Chawan. Now there are a lot of, so we can't trace it how it been done, but it is almost the first set. It's the first set which happened, which was painted in the Mewar school style. We'll talk about what is Chaur Panchashika style or the indigenous style which we are talking about. And then you have this, so it's the first set which is the Ragmala. There are other Ragmalas also, it's not first Ragmala which is acquired. But so the Ragmala is a set of the ragas, a set of a poetry. And so it's a garland of the ragas. It's a non-representational text, if you see in a manner. The ragas can't be represented. But they have introduced a system of representing the ragas and the raginis. Okay. And they have personified it. So you have 6 ragas, 6 raginis and all this how. So how a musical, a non-representational format is depicted, is represented, is illustrated in the Ragmala is very interesting to look. And there is very clear chronology as well as the name of the artist, which is very clearly given in the text, in the folios, the painting folios. So the earlier, like the Ragmala set, the Chawan Ragmala set is painted by Nisaradev. And so he is the earliest artist working in the court of Mewar. And then you have another artist which is Sahibuddin and Manohar. So they too have works in the same time period, in the same, but their style is totally different. So there are sets which they have worked together and there are sets which they have worked apart. So you will get certain, this is the Manohar school. If you see, it's more like a Manohar style and this is more like a Sahibuddin style. So you can clearly make a distinction from Manohar to Sahibuddin about the color palette, about how to conceptualize a particular space, composition and all is totally different in the Manohar and Sahibuddin's case. Then you have Kota. This is from the Kota and Blue. You can very clearly as in if you have come across and you are and you are versed, even you are acquainted about the miniature style and all around the Rajasthan, you can easily identify Kota from its lush vegetations, the greenery, the depiction of the forest and various floras and the fauna. Then we move towards Kishangarh. And Kishangarh is almost like, if you see, when we look at Mewar it's almost the blooming style, it's almost coming up. And it's the early style of Rajasthan and all. And then when we move towards Kota has certain, like Kota initially looks very indigenous in its earlier representation. Later when they have a connection with the Jahangir and all, there is an influence of Mughal which comes into the Kota or Mughal school. Then Kishangarh has influence. Kishangarh develops with the Mughal influence, but Mughal as well as the artist's own persistence, artist's own creative desire. So to understand Kishangarh in the format of Rajasthan school, it's like it's more manneristic, it's more very refined style of painting when you move to Kishangarh. You have a sort of naturalism. You see almost a very refined detailing and all, which is represented in very dynamic style, even in the color palette, even in the linear style, the linear quality of the painting, the drawing quality of the painting. Even if you see. Then comes after Rajasthani, and not after, but simultaneously, where you have the courts of Bikaner and courts of the Jodhpur develops late, but Mewar school. But similar time you have what happens. most of the artists, after Jahangir came onto the throne, he removed a lot of artists from the Akbar attire. So most of the artists for the work, for in search of patron and all, start moving. So it believed that a lot of artists moved towards the Rajasthan school, in the terrain of Rajasthan, and went to different schools of Rajasthan. Like, as I said, there are in Kota, during the time of Jahangir, there are artists who went to Kota. Then they went to the small, which is known as the popular Mughal style. Which is popular Mughal style is where you have all these small governors, which is under Mughal, but they hold a lot of power. They have subsumed to Jahangir or to the Mughal power, but they are the governors of their own places. So these governors also becomes patrons, and they also have similar. They also want to represent such similar taste as their kingship. Okay, so there are a lot of artists. Not a lot of, but artists who are traveling to this court also after they lose their patron as a. And then there are artists who move towards Pahari schools. Okay, so Pahari, again, as I said, Rajasthan already have its own folk tradition and indigenous style, and then the Mughal style come up and make it like in Kota. Similarly, Pahari already have their own folk tradition. Okay, so the earliest school of Pahari which we come across is Basholi, and Basholi, you will see this sort of a courtly style, the representation of a courtly style, as well as the folk quality of this very vibrant colors, bold outlines. That is Pahari. So you have a court style which is developing with or without Mughal, as it happened in Rajasthan. So Basholi also is devoid of such a Mughal influence. Pahari has the influence of the Rajasthan schools, of mostly, if you see this tradition, so it's mostly called Rajasthan school because we are not very sure which schools take it. So it has that sort of recognition. It's influence from not from direct Mughal influence, but somewhere down from Rajasthan. Okay, and so even with coming up of Rajasthani schools, you have the themes certain themes remain intact, but then there are other texts which I will start representing. You have Rasmanjaris, you have Rasik Priya, Rasmanjari, Nayak Nayika Bheda. Then you have the bardic stories like Dhola Maru and all these, which talks about the Velord, which talks about the victory, warriors and all, which started representation, which started being illustrated. So this is that sort of tradition, that sort of thematic content is represented in the different courts or the different schools of Rajasthan. Like you see Ragmala in the court of Mewar also, you will see Ragmala in the court of Bundi also, you will see in the court of Jaipur also. So all these, and like Rasik Priya is there in the court of Bundi, Rasik Priya is there in the court of in the Pahari schools. And these are all not secular. I would say they are all secular poetries and the secular texts. They talk about the Nayak and Nayika, the hero and the heroines. And later, so this look more like, the imagery look more like a Krishna. But mostly, until and unless it is not a Geet Govind, it is not Krishna, it is Geet Govind or Krishna Leela, they are the Nayak and Nayikas. Quite late in 18th century and all, the representation, the Rasik Priya and Rasamanjari text include it as the Radha Krishna, even in the writing form. Okay, otherwise they talk in the form of not as the Radha Krishna, they have written down, they have mentioned them as the Nayak and the Nayikas. So, and these texts almost developed in a very close association with the Indian aesthetic tradition of the Rasa theory. I feel when I'm not saying it is not a statement which I'm making, but I feel to understand particular bhava, particular emotion, each Nayika, each heroine is depicted in that manner. Each heroine is represented, is explained in the text in that manner. Okay? And most of them are the Shringaric poetries. So there are heroines, like they are divided, they are the Ashtanayikas, which are which are described according to their emotion, or which are described according to their emotions as well as their condition. Like one of you have Vasak Sajja, who is getting ready, who is decked up with makeup and who is waiting for his lover to come. So he is getting ready. Then, as I said, he is that Ashtanayikas or these sort of heroines are depicted in different mood, in different bhavas. And so Abhisarika, if you see, Abhisarika is a heroine who is going to meet her lover in the dark. So how you understand this is Abhisarika? Of course, it is written there. But iconography is also a very interesting part which develops with this coming up of the hero and heroines. The iconography of the particular characters. So when you see a snake, when you see a dark night, when you see a skeleton in the Pahari and all, you will see a lot of characters like this. This is where you know the heroine is Abhisarika, because she is somebody who is taking all that risk and going to meet her lover. This is from Krishna Leela. And you will see how for Pahari it is very interesting. Like of course it's in Mewar or even in somewhere in Kishangarh and all, you will see there is a typology, there is an archetype which is decided for the male and the female as an aristocratic class, and they will be decked up like this. There will be no change as such which will come, or which will, as we are talking about Ajanta, about the attires and all, which reflects the contemporary time. That is not happening, at least somewhere in the Jahangir, but that to remain courtly. But when we move towards Pahari, you will again start seeing this contemporary life, contemporary culture reflecting into the painting tradition. Because the dresses and all, which is more like because of the Mughal sovereignty which they have accepted, they start dressing up in that style, and then certain notions, certain objects which are used, which belongs to Pahari. So you have seen the Basholi style. Then we move, after Basholi comes Gulair. And see this Basholi, Gulair, what is happening in Rajasthan is they all are independent state altogether. But what is happening in this Pahari schools, what we call is, like their center is changing. So Basholi was the first center, initial center, and it was ruled by the Pahari schools. The area was ruled by Basholi. Then slowly the capital shift to Gulair, or the power come to the people, the ruler who is there in the Gulair. So the school shift to Gulair. Okay, and Gulair defines very refined style of Pahari, as well as one of the most refined, sophisticated style in the Indian painting tradition, if you see. So Gulair, I was talking about Nansukh. Nansukh has worked in Gulair, and Nansukh genealogy, like Pandit Sew. Pandit Sew is his father, and then his two brothers, like Nansukh and his other brother Manku. They worked in the court of Gulair. Then he went to Jasrota, to Balwant Singh. So that is the lineage which you can describe, like if you are aware about B.N. Goswami, Dr. Ratan Pari. All these worked on this genealogy of the artist. Okay, the migration of the artist from one court to another, and how this artist take one style which they have developed. So you will find the Gulair style in the court of Jasrota, or Jasrota style in the court of Gulair, because the artist is moving, artist is migrating, and he is taking style with it. So this is very interesting if you look at that how this whole mobilization of the style happens, and very interesting, like how they have almost decided, and this not iconography, but more like this concept of beauty, which is the concept of beauty, the concept of feminine beauty, which is almost the Pahari school exclaims that and defines it. If you see linear quality, if you see soft and how they're treating the body, I'm not identifying with gender, but then how they are treating the bodies is very important to give that tactile quality which is happening. And even not only about the like tactile quality in a manner, like how the skin is treated, how the jewelry is treated, how like that diaphanous or this translucent quality of a attire. All these are very important to look at. Lush green vistas of the Pahar, of the mountain which is captured. Okay. So with that, I finish my discussion on introduction to the Indian painter. Anybody has any
One
doubts?
question. Yeah.
Huh.
Do Marwar has its own school in Marwar region, or Bihar is the only one for Marwar region? Because Mewar has its own school.
Marwar has no school. It's Jodhpur, no?
Okay, it's Jodhpur. So do they have their own style?
Huh.
Because I visited, of course, the museum. So I have so many things in that. So where do I place them? In Jodhpur, its own school, or in a private school?
What? I'm
Like
not
you said,
getting you.
okay.
Voice is breaking. I'm not getting what you're saying.
Rather comes in Marwar only. No, that's
It's the see मेवाड़ ऐसे मेवाड़ बहुत बड़ा है ना तो मेवाड़ में किशनगढ़ कम also in मेवाड़ उसमें क्या है? We are not talking from the religious from the regional context. We are talking more from the because you can't call it Udaipur school, Mewar school ko. It's not only Udaipur. So when you're talking about Marwar is not only Jodhpur na. Marwar में जोधपुर है, सिरोही है, पाली है. All these are also the other schools na. Ghanerao hai. So in that manner. So that's why it's a Marwar school.
Marwar. Thank you.
Okay. So है Marwar है.
No, you didn't. That's
हाँ, but that's why I said Marwar comes late. मैंने बोला उस समय.
अच्छा late.
ऐसे बहुत सारे स्कूल है. I can't bring all that and in the class and पढ़ेंगे. फिर तो पूरा 4 साल Indian miniature पढ़ेंगे. Okay, so anybody has any questions, any doubts?
In the chat room, someone has asked the question.
Parag, you talk about B.N. Goswami and another author. Can you tell it again? Dr. Ratan Parimu. So, B.N. Goswami has mostly worked in the, if you see, in Pahari schools, like what he call now as Himachal and Punjab school. And mostly on the migration. If you see, mostly on this, the genealogy, the lineage of the artists. So, if somebody is interested to look into how the artist migrated, what are their genealogy, and that he has tracked that. And he has tracked, it's very interesting to look at somewhere he has tracked that there are artists who from the court of Gujarat, like from the region of Gujarat has went to in Himachal and all and settled there, and they have their, and they still practice the tradition of painting style. It's okay. And Dr. Ratan Parimu works in different, he has major work on Jain paintings, he has worked on Rajasthani paintings, he has recently, there is a book, he has worked on Ramayana from Pahari schools, I think from Kangra or somewhere. So he has worked very prolifically on the Indian miniature. So you can look in that also. There are a lot of, when we will go into detail, I will give you the names of the other scholars also, like the scholarship of different artists, different scholars like Randhawa and all. There are a lot of them. We'll look into that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Bye. you.